And Mr. Speaker, I don't think that I have to explain in any great detail the importance of the discharge and or disposal of sewage into the maritime environment. We simply cannot do so because, one, we run the risk, as I indicated, that we could potentially have major issues associated with pollutants in the marine environment, damage to marine life. We also have, Mr. Speaker, the issue as it relates to Barbados' perception and how environmental groups would view Barbados if we were to allow this behavior to happen. And therefore, the Act is very clear, Clause 209, where it says that operators of vessels must comply with sewage management. And it goes on to talk about they must have a sewage plan, and they must, of course, avoid anything that could have long-term consequences for our marine environment. Of course, the bill is also very clear as it relates to chemical waste, and it makes the point that no person shall discharge chemical waste into the marine environment. It talks about the responsibilities of the vessel or the boat master, operator of the member of the crew in relation to such. The other issue, of course, is vessel refueling, and that's at section clause 211, where it talks about when the vessel is being refueled, that a person shall cease any fuel flows where there is an indication of a spillage or of overflow. Of course, if there's a spillage, Mr. Speaker, and it goes undetected, it could, of course, ruin our marine resources. And it goes on at sea to speak about the fact that you have to fill all portable tanks ashore before placing them on the vessel. Again, another protection mechanism for any fuel overflow. It also speaks to vessel emissions at clause 212. It talks about the fact that every person shall make an effort to prevent, reduce, and control emissions from the vessel. It also speaks to 213 about vessel noise management. And even though it might sound, Mr. Speaker, very simple in respect to say about why you're instituting a vessel noise management within the bill, of course, if you are in the sea, the waters, and you have vessels that are obviously at a decibel level, headed to not withstanding the air, you can imagine the discomfort that you could have with persons who are, of course, using our waters. But what is clear, Mr. Speaker, that the penalties and enforcement, those are contained at clause 214, and it basically says a person who contravenes sections 203, 205, 206, 207, 208, 209, 210, 211, 212, and 213 is guilty of an offense and liable on summary conviction to a fine of 100,000 or to imprisonment for 7 years. I mean, Mr. Speaker, the fine, some people might say, well, that's a lot of money. But if you can imagine, if we do not have these protections in place and our marine environment becomes so polluted that we are unable to recover, of course, 100,000 wouldn't be enough maybe to pay for a cleanup and to protect Barbados' name abroad. So even though it may come across as though the fine is significant, the fine is not significant in relation to the economic fallout that any polluter could cause us, be it a fuel spill, be it a sewage spill in the ocean, within our borders, that obviously will be more damning to us. And therefore, we have to ensure we put the appropriate mechanisms in place to sustain our marine environment. At part 11, the bill also goes into great detail in respect of marine salvage and wrecks. The bill clauses 214 right through until 232 addresses the marine salvage and wreck in general, and particularly the protection of the marine environment from vessel wrecks and the environmental impact that wrecks can cause and the devastating consequences to our marine environment, of course, negatively impacting people who work within this sector. Various toxic substances may leak from a vessel during a wreck, and obviously that's consequential to the marine or to a maritime accident. And therefore, we have to ensure we protect. The bill sets out the framework. It talks about the duty of a receiver at 218. It speaks to the passage over adjoining lands. It also speaks to the power of the receiver to be appointed. And, you know, Mr. Speaker, there's a common law principle, I'm told, and the general principle is that no cure, no pay, meaning that if a salvor expanded his or her time, effort, and resources to salvage a shipwreck and was only partially successful, he cannot claim compensation. The International Maritime Organization obviously is seeking to incentivize those persons to sustain the salvage industry, and they did so via the 1989 International Salvage Convention, of which Barbados is a party to. And as a result, he had to develop a fair regime for this sector so that persons could be compensated for the work in respect of wrecks. The Marine Salvage and Wrecks regime in the Domestic Shipping Vessels Bill also follows, Mr. Speaker, the IMO requirements that we are to ensure, and it sets out at clause 236. It sets out very clearly the criteria for salvage rewards. So that's all clearly documented. It talks about the salvage value of the vessel and other property. It talks about the skill and the effort, the salvers in respect to preventing and maintaining, minimizing, damage to the environment. It talks about the danger, the nature of danger, and so on. I'm not going to go into all of that detail, Mr. Speaker, because it's all very clear in the bill. If we go to part 12, and at part 12, it speaks again. The bill is very comprehensive in its approach as it relates to abandoned, derelict, and stray vessels. Of course, we are very clear that no person shall abandon, store, or leave in a derelict condition a vessel on land, coast, or at sea. And of course, Mr. Speaker, the regime under this bill will provide for the management of abandoned, derelict, and stray vessels. And as such vessels, of course, Mr. Speaker, will pose a significant threat not only to public health, but also a threat to the lives of the environment, and of course the resultant threat to the ocean space. As vessels become abandoned and derelict for many reasons, the owners oftentimes may neglect or abandon the vessel when they can no longer afford to maintain them. Some vessels break loose from anchor or moorings and drift away, and some may be stolen. And of course, when we have severe weather events like a hurricane, or sometimes you have flooding, strain away could of course happen. And in cases where we have hurricane or type events in our country, vessels of course can sink at moorings or become submerged in tidal areas or become stranded on shorelines, of course, or on reefs. So the bill also makes it very clear that abandoned, derelict, or stray vessels can cause problems for marine, and therefore, by blocking navigational channels, damaging the ecosystem, and of course, like I said earlier, some vessels may contain fuel or other hazardous material, and leaks obviously could cause significant problems. So the Shipping Domestics Vessel Bill outlines the regime for the removal of and I should say the safe removal and safe disposal of abandoned, derelict, and of course, stray vessels. It's all set out. The removal at clause 251 in respect of abandoned vessel. At clause 254, it speaks to the removal and disposal of a derelict vessel, and of course, vessel breaking. Vessel breaking involves leading the vessel to shore if it is in water, assessing the contents, locating, isolating fuel tanks and oils and so on. So that's all is all covered within this particular section, section 12 of the bill. If you go to section 13, in respect of clauses 260 to 279, where it speaks to marine facilities, the interpretation section of this bill defines marine facility as a vessel building, maintenance, repair, recycling facility, a vessel haul-out facility, a marina, a vessel docking facility, a vessel storage facility, or any other facility in relation to a small vessel. Of course, it is clearly defined within the bill. It talks about the Marine Facilities Survey, that no person shall put into operation or continue in operation a marine facility without a marine facility survey. And it speaks to the survey report. And of course, a marine facility must also be certified. And of course, the surveyor is the one who would have to certify the marine facility, and that's all taken into account at section 265 of the bill. It also speaks to unfit marine. It also speaks to unfit marine facility at clause 270, and obviously it carries with it environmental planning and the like. So, Mr. Speaker, it's quite exhaustive there. I don't want to go through every component as it relates to that part of the bill. Suffice to say that once the certificate is issued by a surveyor, subject to carrying out of the marine facility survey by the surveyor in respect to the facility, then all should be in order. Mr. Speaker, the suite of laws presented will also, as I indicated earlier, provide safety environmental guidelines that span the entire coastal and marine space and regulates the safety and environmental conditions in respect of small vessels, craft, small craft, sports craft, and the like. But one of the things I might wish to make the point while we are at this junction is to speak to the whole issue of the corporate social responsibility efforts being conducted by the port, the Barbados port. In relation to our marine facilities, specifically the haul-up facilities, the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport wishes to make the point that the Barbados Port Inc. has physical and operational responsibility for the moorings in Carlisle Bay, for Spikestown, and for Prospect on the West Coast, in addition to the berthing facilities in the Corinage and the Sherrill Draft. Might also add, excuse me, that the key initiatives undertaken, just to bring the House up to date with respect to what is happening, the Shallow Draft Marina, the Barbados Port Inc. is upgrading the marina. They've provided for additional 70 stern to berths there. The project, of course, included the wave attenuation structures to reduce wave energy during extreme wave events. Obviously, a fuel dock is there to ensure that we refuel, as well as the fish and farmers market for the Fisher Fort community in that area. And obviously, the entire project cost for the Shallow Draft Marina is anticipated to be about $40 million. The boat haul-out facility, and this, of course, Mr. Speaker, is an area that we have to focus on. It is going to be located on the Mighty Griner Highway. Of course, it will offer marine maintenance and repair services to Barbados. Of course, we're going to expand our reach to ensure we can do it regionally, as well as on the international scene for the boating community. The project was tendered as a concession. It was awarded to a contractor. The planning application has been submitted, and it's currently being evaluated by the relevant agencies. And as soon as that is completed, of course, the Barbados Port will have the facility operated under a regime where boat owners will benefit from tax concessions on selected parts and equipment. There is a temporary boat lift-out facility. That is the lift-out facility when you're on Princess Silas going down to that highway, part of the highway, you will see boat storage on the site adjacent to the Baiko on Prescott Boulevard. That's the name of it, Prescott Boulevard. The facility provides a space for the repair and for the maintenance of vessels. And as we pass that area, you can see what is happening there. It's outfitted with the necessary electrical and water utilities. And the area is being used predominantly by fishing vessels, but has adequate space for residential and commercial boating community. The lift-out service at the shallow draft, there was an issue in that area with respect to the power lines overhead, and therefore those have been relocated underground, so we no longer have that threat as you go through the entrance of the shallow draft. The port is presently awaiting a similar removal by other providers to participate in the movement of vessels with a high mast from the shallow draft lift-out to the temporary boat facility. The port advised me that they will spend approximately $1 million in this respect, and everything should have been installed at this point in time. But the reality is that they're replacing equipment that was over 40 years old. In respect to the corporate social responsibility, again, the port is also giving significant corporate level support to the fishing center. The Honourable Member for St. James North will be particularly happy as he traverses his constituency to see the wonderful works being executed at the Millie Eiffel Fish Market in St. James. Of course, the works were conducted following consultations with the community. We also had to ensure that the existing fish market was dismantled and a temporary facility was erected. But what you're beginning to see now as it draws close is that you're going to have a wonderful facility with all the aesthetics that you would not even imagine could be associated with the fish market. And like I said, the Honourable Member for St. James North will be absolutely delighted in the facility. I'm told it should cost us approximately $2.7 million, and I've been further assured by the port that construction is on time and there are no cost overruns. The projected cost there is $2.7 million. In respect of the Corinage developments, you know that with respect to the Corinage Bay area, there is an investment going on by Daisy Investments that obviously would have caused some boats and boat owners who were tenants in that general area to be dislocated. What the Barbados Port did, and much to the credit, was to ensure that we still maintain the appropriate facilities for boats and boat owners. And therefore, in the inner Corinage for the monohull vessels, work was done there to the tune of $45,000. In the outer Corinage area for the catamarans, of course, that was a cost of $1.5 million. And the party vessel dock just off the Bridgetown Fisheries area, that was done at a cost of $840,000. I believe I believe it was this week, if I'm not mistaken, that there were some pictures in a local newspaper which obviously sought to indicate the works that we're doing. Of course, at the appropriate time, the port will do what they have to do with respect to further announcements. So I just thought that I would mention a lot of the work associated with the Barbados Port Inc., and of course, as part of this social corporate responsibility campaign. Of course, we are well aware that there is a fire station within the port that the port also constructed at their cost, and of course, not only for the port, but also to ensure that within a defined radius, that fire station can also help communities within the radius of Bridgetown, as so defined by the fire department. So, Mr. Speaker, I said all of that to say that work is ongoing. We have a lot more work to do in respect of the Bridgetown port, but we are grateful for all that they continue to do in respect of their social corporate responsibility in Barbados. Mr. Speaker, in respect of enforcement, at Clause 14 of the bill, from sections 280 to 293, sets out the enforcement regime It talks about the maritime, the marine safety regulator and marine safety officers who will be who will partner, of course, with law enforcement agencies. That is the Marine Unit of the Police Service, and of course the Barbados Coast Guard to ensure compliance. And those things are documented from clauses at 285 all the way to 293. Mr. Speaker, I also think it's necessary that we look at some of the issues associated with with the bill as it relates to marine environmental breaches. Of course, these will include, if you look at Clause 286, a marine environmental breach ticket. It talks about if you anchor a vessel in an area designated as a marine managed area, in a marine protected area, in a marine park, a marine reserve, or other designated area. It talks about anchoring a vessel on a coral reef. It talks about committing any prohibited acts in a designated area contrary to this act, this bill, when it becomes an act, and the statutory instruments made thereunder, or any other enactments related to the management and protection and preservation of the designated marine areas. It talks about the littering and or the discharge of waste into the marine environment, the feeding of turtles, very important, sir, the feeding of turtles and other marine life with unhealthy and non-nutritious foods. It also talks about engaging in environmentally harmful practices which may cause damage to the marine, and operating a vessel or engaging in any act in a matter that causes harm or damage to the marine environment. The offenses are set out. Obviously, the offenses warranting the imposition of a higher penalty as specified throughout the bill. Of course, assessment of legislative breaches and imposition of appropriate penalties are a matter for the courts, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Part 15 of the bill, which speaks to the miscellaneous provisions. Some highlights of this particular part of the bill included the Small Vessels Industry Support Fund, and I might wish to just briefly make the point that there are Clause 298, there shall be a Small Vessel Industry Support Fund to serve as a repository for any monies voted for by Parliament for the fund, fees, voluntary subscriptions, donations, or any other sources. Of course, there is a sustainable economic development initiatives contained in the bill, Clause 300, where it speaks to a regime focusing and strengthening the voice of the industry to secure inputs and continued contributions to the small vessel sector, of course, to the water sports community. And by virtue of Clause 300, a person or group representing small vessel industry may formulate and submit a written proposal to the administration for its consideration of a sustainable economic development strategy or initiative. The ministry, as the regulator of this industry, and the community cannot think of everything, hence the proposed strategies or initiatives for the continued benefit of the industry as a community is recognized, obviously, and will be welcome. Mr. Speaker, Clause 302, and I want to alert the House that we are going to delete at 302 subsection 2C. We are going to delete that clause. Leader opposition, just for your benefit as well, and that we are going to be deleting that clause when we go to committee. But Mr. Speaker, also climate change and disaster mitigation is contained at Clause 303. As you're well aware, Barbados has been championing a lot of initiatives that are necessary for climate change. Obviously, we are faced with a climate crisis, and in every respect, we have to do whatever we can do to mitigate disaster planning. We rely predominantly and very heavily on coastal areas of Barbados for our future economic activity, and therefore, not only for tourism, but not only for the livelihoods and the economic viability of persons working within that sector. But if you take a broader brush, the social economic impact that could cause and across Barbados, would be tremendous, and therefore consistent with what we've been talking about locally, regionally, and internationally. We have to ensure that climate change and disaster management mitigation remain in the forefront, and that we have an adoption plan necessary to ensure the survival of this particular sector. And that is why I spent as much time as was necessary to ensure. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to go through clauses all the way down to 3 or 4. I would also wish to alert the Honourable House as well that clause 310 will be amended, and we will facilitate that amendment when we're in committee. But Mr. Speaker, I think it's safe to say that all the work that we've done in respect of the shipping domestic suite of laws creates that enabling environment and conditions for achieving and maintaining what I consider to be a very safe and happy space for small vessels in the industry. Of course, the water sports community stakeholders. We have to continue to sustain the employment and livelihoods of persons within that sector. And as we continue our economic diversification, Mr. Speaker, industry stakeholders will obviously continue to enhance their earning capacity, not only through the conventional small vessels and water sports activities and the like, but also through becoming, for example, Mr. Speaker, a marine driving instructor. As when I was going through the bill at clause 157, I made that point. Becoming a marine training instructor, establishing private marine training schools or institutions. Talking about, for example, you can conducting night water taxis, which is made provision for in clause 285 of the bill. And that night taxi services regime further elaborated in the small vessels regulations to the bill that will come. Getting, for example, persons involved in careers as a boat technician, getting persons involved as boat manufacturer, getting persons involved in boating repairs and of course, building, and generally creating opportunities for persons as we settle in clauses 300. The domestic vessel suite of laws will also deliver numerous benefits for Barbados, Mr. Speaker. There is a delicate balance between the need to properly regulate in terms of maritime safety and maritime environmental protection at the same time, and supporting economic development activities surrounding the entire sector and industry. And therefore, the legislative framework that we seek to capitalize on the value of these small vessels and related activities, recognizing the importance to sustaining, like I said, the livelihoods, the supporting households, and the overall contribution to the Barbados' tourism product. The shipping domestic laws is not only about correcting the legislative related deficiencies identified by the IMO in the 2018 audit, not having the adequate framework for domestic voyages, but it's also about bringing along underserved sector of people to an industry to the forefront. And we are going to continue to create opportunities within this sector. We are going to ensure that we protect and preserve our maritime environment. We are going to ensure that we have the safe operation of vessels in respect of the marine environment. And we are going to, of course, ensure that the soon-to-be-named Barbados Maritime Transport Administration will be implemented over a period of some 18 months, obviously with the compliance grace period as settled the clause necessary to the clause consequent to the bill. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of work to be done, but we are happy with our engagement with the stakeholders and all that they have done. Mr. Speaker, before I conclude, I think it may be at the appropriate time to speak a little bit about the regime for the protection of ships against piracy and terrorism attacks in the maritime sector. Although this does not feature within this particular framework, because we have very shortly come into Parliament the Marine Shipping Suite of Laws, the Merchant Shipping, Merchant Shipping Suite of Laws. The Shipping Domestic Bill Vessels Bill, while it promotes maritime safety and security, is specific to the small vessels, as I indicated, operating locally within the Caribbean area. But the piracy regime for larger merchant ships engaged in international voyages and transiting what we call the high risk areas is addressed under the Merchant Shipping Act and not the shipping domestic vessels legislation. But it's important to let the House know that in keeping with the IMO security standards that, of course, that they publish, that we are revamping other areas. We've had, not so long ago, attacks on Barbados registered vessels. Those were isolated and dealt with. No harm to Barbados' reputation. But the fact that we have updated legislation coming will obviously put us in good stead. So I thought I'll make that point, albeit not at this point specific to the bill at hand. The other factor that I wish the House to consider is that we have several pieces of legislation to come. Currently, the ministry, of course, the port, and of course the drafters within the Office of the Attorney General, they are working assiduously on ensuring that we bring that additional pieces of legislation to this honorable chamber. And we have to do it because as we build up Barbados' economic base, we have to look to update and modernize our laws as we build out this important sector. I could, for example, Mr. Speaker, talk about the fact that we want, as we've built out tourism, we want to build out shipping and logistics and create that new corridor of economic growth and development for the country. And therefore, if we do that, we will have position ourselves in a better place to exploit all of the economic opportunities that exist based on our very strategic geographic location. Of course, I will speak to that at the appropriate time when we bring the additional suite of legislation to this honorable chamber. But the chamber must also recall that it was on February 12th of this year when the Facilitation of International Maritime Traffic Act, the FAL Act, was enacted, and therefore that act was part of the changing pieces of legislation that we brought to this honorable place to ensure that we look at improving our efficiency, that we look to improve our standards as we seek to reduce congestion in our port, as we ensure that we don't have high emissions as a result of ships being in port idle, waiting for all the paperwork to be completed. That is going at a very good pace, and I want to say that I'm very happy that we are in this place together. Mr. Speaker, as I started out by indicated that this bill, obviously, and matters relating to maritime, is always of a very highly technical nature. I'm not an expert, don't pretend to be. Of course, in matters relating to maritime, I have to take the advice of the officers, some of whom have graced us with their presence in this honorable chamber. But I really want to say to the officers, to the Barbados Port Inc., and to those who would have helped us within the CPC and Office of the Attorney General to get this bill here, a warm thank you. It is important that we recognize those officers who worked tirelessly to help us modernize our legislation. And as I indicated, the Shipping Act of 1994, and since 1994, things have changed at such a great pace. We could not have continued on that path. And I'm therefore grateful to all of those who helped us in this particular bill. I also want, Mr. Speaker, and I did seek your permission before, to recognize the presence of the officers who are here with us. I would want to start by acknowledging and saying thanks to the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Charlie Brown, who's also been working overtime on off days, on days, and everything else to ensure that we get to this place, amongst other matters that he's working on. I wish to express our thanks to him. I also wish to say a thank you to the Chief Technical Officer, Ms. Jacqueline Blackman, for all the work that she's done. In fact, it could not have been a greater gift Mr. Speaker, to ask her to come to this honorable chamber, because as I have been told, that from of today's date, that is June the 7th, Ms. Blackman will be going on pre-retirement leave. So if I were in a position to rename the bill, perhaps we could call it the Blackman Bill. But I can't do so because the rules of the House will not permit me to do so. But I want to say to Ms. Jacqueline Blackman, our Chief Technical Officer, thank you for all the work that you've done in the ministry. She's done outstanding work. Mr. Speaker, when I tell you she's done outstanding work, she's been a tower of strength and a body of institutional knowledge. And I want to say, as you leave today on your pre-retirement leave, that the ministry shall not forget you, but that you may have additional work to do for us as we continue to expand the work within the ministry. So thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of a young lady who would have worked very closely with her, who's here, and obviously transfer of knowledge is important. Ms. Dion Gibbs, who's with us as well, who's contributed in no small measure to the bill. Let me also thank the officers at the port. I would like to recognize Captain Carol Branch, who's with us. Obviously, I would like to recognize Romel Edwards, Ian Stewart as well, and I believe Mr. John Murray was here earlier, the Chief Executive Officer of the port. So, Mr. Speaker, I've had a long run. I believe I have been somewhat comprehensive in the delivery of the bill in respect of the shipping domestic vessels and the suite of legislation. And as I indicated, it is perhaps always an honor when you can stand in this honorable place and do the work on behalf of a country and certainly on behalf of a grateful nation. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time, and I'm much obliged. Thank you.
Honourable Member Christchurch.
I'm grateful for the applause, sir. Mr. Speaker, as a democracy matures, one finds that debate becomes less partisan and more philosophical. And as it becomes more philosophical, there's individual adherence to policy. And I seize this opportunity to say at the outset that this is one of those occasions when, in a maturing democracy,